So we got these 165 spoilers, and it looks like this chapter is continuing this pretty interesting battle between Yuji and Higuruma. So let's get into it because it begins with a simple explanation of Higuruma. He is a genius at sorcery and currently has the abilities of a grade 1 sorcerer. Okay, so that's a pretty big reveal there. So I guess this is clearing up why he's so adept at using his abilities despite it being implied that he may have recently developed them, unless he hasn't. As far as I know, we're not getting an exact timetable of when he got his abilities, but considering how the Culling game works and what Kenjaku was talking about at the end of the Shibuya arc, it's going to mostly comprise of people that he had individually marked, giving them curse techniques or turning individuals into vessels so that they can become sorcerers from 1,000 years ago, like Sukuna's contemporaries who also were sealed in like cursed objects apparently. So it seems so far that Higuruma may have been marked by Kenjaku to have some kind of curse technique. Now, if that's not the case, then he is just some rogue sorcerer who has been living off of the Jujutsu grid and has kind of just been doing his own thing. But him being said to be a genius here is, like I said, clearing up why he's so good at using Jujutsu. Because like in the previous chapter, we saw him just instantly go into his domain expansion, and it seemed to be, fully complete. Even Megumi at this point still has an incomplete domain expansion. Not to mention all of the other sorcerers who just straight up don't have one yet. And we also saw what else he was capable of, which I guess is what his curse technique is at base, like without the domain and the Judgman stuff, because he seems to have some kind of magic gavel. He can like control it telekinetically, and it can also increase in size, become invisible, and I guess just overall it's a pretty powerful weapon. So it's possible that if Kenjaku allegedly forcibly put a curse technique on this guy like in his 30s, when he's already become like an established lawyer, then it's understandable that it would become like a justice system based curse technique. Because aside from explaining it that way, there's also a possibility that his curse technique / domain expansion just gives him the ability to summon this Judgman guy. I talked about it in my previous review, but the way that this thing is explained makes it seem like it's something that always like exists out there in the Jujutsu world, kind of like how Megumi uses the Ten Shadows technique as an intermediary to summon those beings. This could be something similar to that, or Higuruma's curse technique is just so powerful that it has somehow manifested this Judgman being. But I'm surprised that he's only being classified as like a grade 1 here, because his domain expansion seems to be like special grade. Or maybe it's not, or maybe it's just been so long since we've seen like grade 1 stuff in action that I just forget the difference between it and special. Originally, his technique should temporarily prevent his opponent from using curse techniques, but Itadori has no technique, so he's prevented from using cursed energy instead. Okay, so that's clearing that up. In the previous chapter, we saw Yuji like lose the Judgman mock trial domain expansion thing. It like forced Yuji into this trial and picked one instance in his life where he was like breaking the law, and it was like him illegally going into this pachinko hall because he was like underage. And it was also able to generate like tangible evidence of him from the security cameras. It ultimately led to Yuji like saying the wrong thing, and Judgman's verdict wound up being guilty, and it used confiscation on Yuji. And at first he didn't feel any different, but then at the end of the chapter it was revealed that he can't control his cursed energy. So that was like the first big nerf that Higuruma was able to do against Yuji here. But also, as it said, originally it's used to take away their curse technique. So if Yuji wasn't here, and let's say it was like Megumi and he failed the trial and was found guilty, the confiscation would have taken his ability to use the Ten Shadows technique. But anyway, since Yuji doesn't have a technique, he like improvised, I guess, and like prorated his sentencing. So instead of taking a technique that he doesn't have, he lost his ability to control his cursed energy. Although it says here that he's prevented from using cursed energy, that's just the translation of these spoilers. Like in the official Viz chapter, Yuji himself says, I can't control my cursed energy. Now either it's changed coming into this chapter and he just can't use it at all, that remains to be seen, but I'm thinking he just can't control it, which is Yuji's grassroots anyway, so it could possibly favor him here maybe, or at least more so than it hindering him. Itadori takes Higuruma's attacks and looks for his weaknesses. So I guess he's still like physically fighting him, and Higuruma is going after him with like that magical gavel that I was talking about. And taking his hits here means that I guess, you know, typical Yuji, he's taking a lot of shots, but also trying to figure out things at the same time. And since we're not getting any more information on his weaknesses being discovered, I guess he's not able to do it in time. And then after this, I guess something happens and Higuruma somehow goes into his domain expansion again, which is incredible because just doing it once is supposed to be like this arduous task. Like it's supposed to take so much cursed energy that typical sorcerers should only be able to do it like once every couple hours or something maybe. But Higuruma is doing it here within like minutes, I guess. So that could also play into his potential downfall possibly. Like maybe he's using too much cursed energy to be able to generate this domain multiple times and then eventually he gasses out possibly, but we'll go more into that. So anyway, the domain is activated again, deadly sentencing, and forcing Yuji into yet another mock trial, but apparently this time it's more serious because now Itadori is recognized as having committed mass murder in Shibuya, and Judgment rules him guilty and gives him the death penalty. So if you're confused or maybe you just forgot what happened in Shibuya, towards the end of that arc, Sukuna eventually took over Yuji, but at that point he had like 15 fingers in him. So he was, you know, the strongest we had ever seen him at that point, and he just went on a rampage and used his own domain expansion and just wiped out a whole bunch of innocent civilians in Shibuya. Now, of course, it wasn't Yuji that literally did it. It was Sukuna in his body doing it. So in a way, Yuji did kind of do it, but he also didn't. And I guess Judgment isn't able to distinguish between Yuji committing the act and Sukuna using Yuji committing the act, you know? But since Sukuna is a part of this, it makes me think that he might come into play here. Now, I don't think he's gonna come out and like defeat Higuruma because it just doesn't seem like it's the time for that. But Sukuna could do some mind stuff, you know, maybe tell him how to get out of this, or maybe this is where Yuji unlocks his own domain expansion possibly, which is implied to just be Sukuna's, like he gets control of it, because at least that's what Gojo said, that he'd eventually be able to use Sukuna's curse techniques, so I guess he'd be able to use his domain expansion too. So maybe Yuji activates his own malevolent shrine here and it overpowers deadly sentencing, because that's like the popular way of getting out of domains, right? Other than that, you can like brute force your way out of them, but it's next to impossible, or at least it was said by Gojo. And I always thought that was interesting when that was first explained. We didn't really see anybody else do that outside of like the whole Dagon situation. And I always thought it was going to be Yuji that wound up doing this, so he could possibly do it here. Like instead of him just having to succumb to Judgment's death penalty, maybe he like brute forces out of the domain, something that was said to be next to impossible. I mean, Yuji did like consecutive Black Flash, which was said to be near impossible anyway, so why not? And I'd like to see that too, but I don't think it's going to be that simple. Unless Yuji just dies again, and then we have to go through the whole Sukuna reviving him, which would seem a little repetitive at this point. So if Yuji does die, then maybe someone has to revive him aside from Sukuna. I don't know, but let me know what you think is going to happen in the comments. How do you think Yuji is going to get out of this? A sure defeat slash deafening? Let me know. And if you like the video, guys, please give it a like, and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day. See you in the next one.